Hello, welcome back to the Real House Guest of North Hollywood. I'm your host, Carson Frey. I'm so happy you're here. I'm happy you're here because it's my favorite episode of the month. It's book club. So our book for this month is Pursuit of Porsha by Porsha Williams. Let me just start this with Porsha is one of my favorite housewives. To me, she is the ideal housewife. She's the Lucille Ball of the housewives, one of the funniest. Now, is she funny in this book? We'll get to that. To me, Porsha is a perfect housewife because her first season, you see this like young wife whose husband won't let her do shit. And she's very naive and young. And then people are always making fun of like her intelligence. And then last time we saw her on Housewives, she was putting her body at the forefront for the Black Lives Matter movement, and she became a mother. She's not as, she chooses better guys now a little bit. We'll see, because she's going through a divorce right now, so we'll see in this new season of Atlanta. But I do think Porsha has grown, and I think her growth is like what we love as audience members. So for this book, it really kind of, she starts at the beginning. She starts in her childhood, and she was like, I was always different, she essentially said she felt depressed even as a child, but talked about how she would like pretend she was like on QVC and like play pretend. So that childlike playfulness is kind of referenced there. And her father is the son of Hosea Williams, Hosea Williams was like right there with MLK in the civil rights movement. And he's also like done a lot of really, really important work throughout the country, but specifically in Atlanta. Porsha talks about that throughout her time on Housewives. And so her parents divorced when she was young, and she would see her dad like on the weekends. Her dad was a notorious cheater. He cheated on her mom, cheated on her stepmom. He was just like a playboy, and then died when she was really, really young. So pretty much after her dad dies, every single chapter, for the most part, is like her just choosing terrible guys that had all these red flags, and then it going really, really wrong. And then her being like, I'm going to do better. I'm going to think higher of myself. And then kind of like it gets worse and worse. I think the story that kind of surprised me most was when she was in her early 20s, she like went to R. Kelly's, and the fact that she went back multiple times. But I think the book, you kind of understand her point of view of why she did it if you know who R. Kelly was. And you understand like what he was really promising these girls. Because even though Porsha was 24, you'll know from her mindset at that time, she was a young girl. She always was desperate to be like a mother. She had an abortion. She had a miscarriage later with her husband Cordell, and then it becomes this like everlasting thing of like she wanted to be a mother, and that was her destiny. It was just like finding the right man to make her mother. It was like always very rocky. Housewife though, like Bravo wise, what I found the most interesting is she references all the women by name except for Kenya. And she kind of goes in depth of her first time filming, and she just calls Kenya the Miss USA. And she talks about how when Kenya went off at her at that event, that then when Kenya was leaving, she had production ask Porsha for a plate of food. That's hilarious and very on brand. Overall, I would recommend this book because I think it's a quick read. I think her story of like never feeling enough and wanting someone to make you feel like you're more. I think it's like a very common story that like women can relate to, but like really anyone too. I wish this book had like Porsha's humor in it. The best part though is like at the end where I think you see the most Porsha is really when she talks about the Black Lives Matter movement and, you know, the death of George Floyd and what that did to her. And I really do want to read a section from that because I think you'll get the most of Porsha from that. and like, because a lot of the book is her being a victim, and I think it's an important story to tell. I just don't think we get as much of the other parts of her. Start quote. In fact, in a matter of months, it seemed like all of America had been turned into a minefield of emotional and physical torture. I had made up my mind that I wasn't ever going to protest again, to be honest, because I was hurt. I was let down. I felt like my home had turned on me. I'm born and raised in Atlanta. It's a place where I'm so proud to embody and represent. In Atlanta, I felt a real sense of community and family. But after that protest, I didn't recognize the city that made me. To literally run for my life in the middle of downtown Atlanta streets, trying to avoid cars as they barreled down familiar roads, was traumatizing, to say the least. I felt like I was at war in my own home. It didn't help when I discovered that my cousin and his girlfriend were assaulted by the police. His girlfriend's jaw was broken and everything. This couldn't be my city. A city my family had poured so much of ourselves into to make better. It couldn't. I looked into the eyes of people sworn in to protect us and simply saw rage. I looked into the eyes of men and women who were there to hold up our democracy, and all I saw were cold riot shields. End quote. I think what kind of made that moment for me, and that whole section of the book, which is very near the end, it's like, I think right before the epilogue, I don't think meeting Dennis changed Porsha. I think Dennis was a little bit better than her ex, but she really kind of blew over how their relationship ended. I think becoming a mother finally changed Porsha, and that's why in that part of her life we see obviously what she's talking about is incredibly heartbreaking and sad, but we see more of who Porsha is. So I would recommend this book if you're a Porsha fan. If you're an Atlanta fan, if you just like need a quick read, it's not long. I don't think it's like the best memoir ever written. I'll give it like a B plus maybe. But I do love Porsha. There are things about her I want to know more of. And I want to know more about her mom. But look, like, guys, I don't know anything about books. I watch TV all day. So for this episode, I decided to bring in someone who knows stuff about books. And she actually knows nothing about Bravo. But I love her more than anything in the world. She is my favorite person, like, on planet Earth. She goes by a lot of names. Some people call her Jane. Some people call her Mimi. I call her Grammie. She's my grandma. I love her more than anything. She read the book twice and sat down and we had a Zoom about it. And we already did the interview yesterday. So just reflecting, I think what's so cool about this book and like my grandma reading it and us talking about it is like we all relate to Porsha. You know, my grandma's in her 80s. I'm like close to 30. Portia's like in her 40s, and we all share this thing that's like so shared among a lot of people. So I hope you guys enjoy the interview, and if you love Grammie on the podcast, comment wherever you listen to this and say, I love Grammie, give me more Grammie. Okay, bye guys. Hi, Grammie. I'm so glad you're on my podcast.
Well, hi, Carson. Thank you for inviting me. This has been fun.
I love it. And you read more books than anyone I know, but you don't watch Bravo at all. But you read this book with me. um, what was like your impression of like what a real housewife is, or like Bravo housewives?
Oh, I guess I thought they were pretty surface and silly and just wanting lots of attention, and that basically they didn't have much depth to them.
And do you think this book like matched that?
No, I was really surprised. I thought, okay, this is going to be a bit of fluff that I'll whiz through, but I really enjoyed it. In fact, I read it a second time because this woman had so much more depth to her than I thought. And I
Yeah.
was surprised to hear about her background, her family being so well known in Atlanta.
I went back and watched old episodes that she referenced to like make an episode guide for this. But what was interesting is like how she portrayed it in the book kind of matched up, I think, to what I saw in, both. Like it seemed like she did seem naive and she seemed aware of that in a way. What do you think like motivated like Portia to like tell her story?
Well, I think she wanted to tell her side of it because she knew that she behaved rather um, childishly and
Hmm.
so forth in that first episode. I haven't seen the episode, so I don't know. But from the way she talked about it, I feel like she's grown a lot since she first started doing that. And I think
Go
she wanted to tell her story.
Going back and watching the episodes, I realized everyone's making fun of her, like for being dumb. Like there's all these references to like Portia's stupid, Portia's not that bright, and I think maybe the book is kind of like a defense of that in a way. Like I am smart and I do have things about me outside of just being like a girlfriend or a wife, even though that's something clearly she wants so bad and she references it so much in the book.
Oh, she does. I think that desire to please her father,
Mhm.
that she never was able to develop a good relationship with him.
Yeah.
And that comes across in the horrible men that she dated. And uh,
Yeah.
just the way she lived her life was pretty frivolous in a lot of ways, even though she did start the daycare and
Hmm.
did some other things. But
Do you think like Portia, like she wanted, because something I was like, did she want to be loved by her dad? So that's why she was looking for men? Or was that also like a sense of security in a way? Because her father was like, even though he was terrible, he like took care of the community and was like this like provider almost, you know?
oh, that desire to have her father love her was so immense. And I think that happens to a lot of girls with abusive type fathers.
Hmm.
But the fact that he was so charming on the one hand and then could be so mean and dismissive of her on the other hand.
Which is kind of every guy she dated.
Exactly. That's what, every time I read about a new guy she met and how they were very charming and wonderful at first, and then they would treat her so badly and she would take it. That's what got me that, well, like on that Robert
Hmm.
Kelly,
R. Kelly.
she kept going back. I mean, she went back to him even after he had treated her, while a woman with plenty of self-confidence after the first time would have said no.
Yeah.
But she kept going back. And I think it does tie back to her father and her continually wanting his approval and trying to be perfect all the time.
Yeah. And it seems like she kind of defends that need to be perfect with being like religious, because that's like the only thing she kind of knows about herself, is like the religion, which
Yes.
she uses it to defend almost like all of her making the same mistakes, but it's so contradictory also I found throughout the book. It's like, well, I have to be a good woman, I have to be a good wife, I need to be like demure and like subdued, and then she's like, but I'm at the club throwing back shots. And so it contradicts a lot as well.
Oh, that's a good point. She really does use God as her excuse for doing some things. And yeah, I wasn't comfortable with the whole using religion. I think she
Mhm.
did way too much of that, giving
Yeah.
God credit or blaming him. I mean, it felt like,
Yeah, it's a lot of what the book was. It's very religious. And like
yeah,
some of it, it just felt kind of like she was repeating stuff. Like it didn't feel new. It's just like, this is what I know, and I'm going to just repeat it for paragraphs and paragraphs throughout the book. It wasn't like, this is my point of view on religion. It was coming up constantly. Um, did you feel like there were times where Portia, though, was like not truthful?
oh, well, yes. I mean, because she wanted to impress us with, you know, how good she was and how
Hmm.
capable but there were things like uh, when she kept talking about her work and yet she's running off all over the country, like she was in Vegas, she was in Chicago,
Chicago.
and so how could you have a job or have a daycare operation, and or like when she said that it was important in their family that you do it by yourself without help from anyone. And yet she was always having boyfriends loan her money or
Because she
help
could
her
never
out.
make payroll. She like was always behind. There was always something wrong with the building. Um, is there anything though about Portia's book like you related to or like you like understood about your own self from the book?
Oh, I think that's one of the things that I liked about it was because she was lacking in that self confidence and letting people run all over her because she didn't have enough confidence in herself to speak up. And I
Mhm.
know I was that way growing up.
I
While
think
I
it's
was
a
strong and independent, but I wasn't always.
I think it's very relatable for like a lot of women to like learn how to like use your own voice. Because she always like I didn't like how she described herself at the beginning, but there was one thing that really stuck out was when she would do like the playing pretend, the QVC, like I'm selling stuff on TV. I was like, that's the Portia I know to be true. And I think Portia, I think why a lot of viewers like her is because when we met her, she was right in her marriage with Cordell. And so we essentially saw the marriage fall apart and then saw her be
Yes.
single and saw her be messy. Like people like Portia because she's not like she doesn't say the right thing, you know, she doesn't know all the right things. She makes mistakes and but she's funny and likable about it. And she's very like when she's silly and not like trying to impress a man, she's very different. Because like a lot of housewives too, you're seeing it on the perspective of how women relate to each other. You know, men aren't like a big part of the show. So you're seeing her with older black women in Atlanta, you're seeing a different side of her. But then, you know, throughout the show, she does what she does in the book. It's she makes similar mistakes. It's like, oh, Porsha, no, like not him. But you do see her grow. Like the man she eventually has a baby with, he's not the worst guy. He's not the best guy, but he's like not R. Kelly, you know? On the show, Grammie, he's known as the hot dog man because he owns a bunch of hot dog businesses.
Oh, well, yeah, I really did think he seemed the best of the lot.
Hmm.
And her relationship, and I don't think she really covered why it didn't work out too well.
Yeah, it's very briefed over. It's very much like I fell in love, we had a baby, and then we broke up, which is kind of
Exactly.
like how it was. I think there's cheating. I think he cheated on her, which makes sense because that's like the guy Portia always goes for.
Yeah, she likes these charming guys that appeal to a lot of women and
Mm-hmm.
they use women, but then there are a lot of men like that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think you said something about she was funny, but I don't think her humor came through in the book. I
Yeah.
didn't pick up that she was funny.
It didn't. And on the show, you do see her humor a lot. Like she and this other woman, Phaedra, like they are like this duo, this comedy duo, and they call themselves Frickin' Frack. And they
Oh,
just do like all these silly, silly things. And it's, yeah, you don't see her humor at all, which is
oh,
really the sad part because she is hilarious.
I wish she had put some more of that in the book rather than all that about God. I mean,
Yeah, and or more for like joyful moments because any of the things that were good in her life, it's almost like bragging in the book, you know?
yes, you're right.
There aren't like the moments that are just like, oh, these like when she did talk about the women on the show, she did you notice she didn't reference, which you don't know her name, Kenya, Miss USA. She always just calls her Miss USA. She doesn't
Oh,
reference
that,
Kenya by name at all. At all. And they've been these enemy frenemies for like 10 years. And I was like, she probably didn't say her name because they probably weren't good when she wrote the book. So she didn't want to get sued.
well, that's what I felt like. She really wanted to get back at her in
Hmm.
some way by telling her side of the story. But
Do,
the thing I felt, the part of the book that I felt was most genuine that she was being truthful about was the end of it where she talks about becoming involved in the Black movement.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, I felt that was so genuine, and she wasn't trying to impress anybody, but just telling
I wanted
the
more of
story.
that. Like, I wanted more of those moments and what of that section I was highlighting throughout the book. But that one, I was like the whole section because I was like, this is the best written, stuff. And I think it gave us a sense of who Portia was more than anything else. Like the part where she wrote when she talked about how after George Floyd died, but before Breonna Taylor, there were all those protests, right in the aftermath. And she talked about her brother got hurt by the police, and so did his girlfriend. And she was like, my family built this city, we fed this city, and my city just turned on me. And I was like, that like felt like it gave me chills reading it because I was like, that's one truly how the movement felt at that time, but also it gave us a greater sense of who Portia is.
It did. I mean, the way she wrote it, I felt I could remember that moment of watching that on TV and how
Mhm.
horrified we all were, and that whole Black movement. I went to hear a woman speak about Black Lives Matter,
Mhm.
who was started that, and it brought it all back to me because it was so genuine. I think reading the rest of the book, I kind of felt read it from a distance. I didn't
Mhm.
get totally involved with her emotion about anything,
Yeah,
but that last part really got me.
you felt like her power, but I also think her having a child, she grew up so quick because I think you get her immaturity a lot throughout the book. And then it's like all of a sudden, she meets the hot dog guy, she has a kid, they don't work out, and then it goes into that. But I wonder how much of that was like a reflection of like becoming a parent. And because she did talk about in the book, her miscarriage and like becoming a step parent. And she really saw this as like this greater purpose. And so it's like once that happened, it's like, okay, are you more settled in who you are in a way?
That's true. I Because that even made me think about when my first child was born, and that how it does change your life, and it did change hers.
Yeah,
It,
because it felt like this destiny she kept talking about.
right. Yeah, I
Mhm.
because yeah, doing the abortion and the miscarriage,
Mhm.
and that was kind of a lifelong dream of hers to
That
be
was
a.
the most consistent thing I felt like throughout the book. It's not really like I felt like she didn't really know what she wanted out of a marriage or a husband. She knew what the Bible told her, but she also knew what she saw in her own family. So I think it was so confusing. But I think her mom, too, and you see it on the show and how she talks about her in the book, her mom was the most consistent for her, of like, this is what I look up to.
Exactly. And I think that's true of a lot of people who have had a kind of a rough childhood. They'll point out mom was the consistent one. She was the one who gave me my values and was stuck with me through everything, which her mother did.
I did go back because remember the scene in the book where they described like when she got kicked out of her husband's house and she was moving into her mom's house, but they didn't, and they were filming it for the show, but her mom didn't want her filmed unpacking her stuff in like a small guest room. And she was like, no, Portia's living in my room. And so she made them film her packing her stuff out in her master bedroom. And I rewatched that scene and it's like they're faking it. They're completely faking it. But I really like that she did it because she was just trying to hold on to her daughter's dignity. Because Portia was only on her second season on the show. She wasn't really famous yet. And so I think from her like mother's perspective, she just didn't want her daughter to be embarrassed any more
I
than she
know.
had already been.
I would like to know more about her mother. I
Hmm.
mean, she's in, like, I'm kind of curious how she lost her daycare and they ended up homeless, because
Hmm.
she sounds like such a strong, wonderful woman.
Yeah.
And well, I like the fact that she supported Portia when um, she felt like she was marrying the wrong man, but
Hmm.
she didn't say anything. She let her go ahead with the wedding, which was, some mothers would feel like they had to interfere and say
Yeah.
things that cause problems with the
Yeah.
daughter.
Yeah, no, it's like, I mean, you've been there. I'm sure you didn't, support all of your kids' marriages. And yeah, that I think it really is like what you have to do as a parent. It's the best thing to do as a parent to let them make their own choices and then
Oh,
be there for them when if it doesn't work out, you know?
yeah. I think that's what being a parent is. You push them out into the world and let them make bad decisions, and they learn, and
Hmm.
then be there to help them get over them when they things fall apart.
When
So,
Portia was pregnant, there was a big rumor that she was going to name her baby Portia Jr., and I really wanted that to be true. She ended
oh,
up naming her Pilar, but I was like, Portia Jr., women should name their children after themselves more. I was like, if anyone, because how she is in the show is so silly and she loves herself. She's the one that gets the party going, and she's the one, and you don't see that at all in the book. You really just hear her heartbreak in every it's like, and this
right.
guy and this guy. What do you think though? Like, can you compare this book, Grammy, to like other memoirs? Like where would you say it falls? What is it like? What is it missing?
Well, I wouldn't say it's the best one. I feel like there's some inconsistency in the writing. There were
Mhm.
things that I don't feel were explained very well. We just kind of jump from one bad scene to another.
And I think
Uh,
that we talked about that a little. I think she wrote it just assuming everyone had seen Housewives, so they would know certain things. And so I
that's
think
probably
for a
true.
reader like you, which really isn't a great memoir, because a good memoir you could just pick up and read and you don't need to know the show they were on, you know?
That's probably what it is, because you had a better background. Like,
Mhm.
until you told me, I wasn't aware about a sense of humor,
Yeah.
because that comes through in the book. And now I would like to see the show and get a
I'll send
better
you the
feel.
episode watch guide. You
Please
can watch
do.
some of those. Because I think it's fun too, the moment she talks about it in the book of the Miss USA moment with Kenya, where she calls her Miss America instead of Miss USA. And she wasn't even really signed on to film yet. They were like, we'll just test you out.
Right,
Um, but in the show, you can see how embarrassed she was. Like she was just like it to me, it's just like this young kid. And
right.
that I think came through in the book was just how childlike she is, you know?
Oh, exactly. I kept, when she was talking about these things she was doing, and I think, but you're just 24. I mean, you're barely, old enough to do any of this. And
Yeah.
I guess I always assumed most of the housewives were in their mid 30s to 40s.
Most of them are, but sometimes they'll have like a girl, I think she was 27 when she joined, but she was like a young NBA wife, essentially. But it was kind of crazy with Portia on there because at the time all the other women were in their 40s. So it's clear, like, if it wasn't for the show, they would not be hanging out at all.
Exactly.
Is there anything else that you liked or disliked that you hadn't said? Were you glad you read it?
Well, I am very glad I read it. And because it gave me a different picture of just what real housewives are. I don't know how the other women are on shows, but it did change my view of that show.
Yeah.
And I like reading memoirs of women, and I like that she let her vulnerability come out, because a
Mhm.
lot of times people don't want to admit that, oh, I mean, she didn't screw up with one man. She screwed up, what, three times, four times,
Yeah.
that we know about. So yeah, I'm really glad I read that, and I liked her. I would enjoy meeting her, I think.
I would too. Portia's my number one. She's
Oh,
my number
really?
one from Atlanta. Because I love all the housewives, but whenever someone tells me they don't watch Atlanta, I'm very like, why? I think it's the best housewife, and they've had bad seasons, but I think overall it's one of the strongest ones. And um, Portia was a star from the moment she like came on. So I really like her. And I think her most vulnerable moment was talking about the R. Kelly stuff too, Robert, because, that was when she wrote about it. I don't know if the court case was ongoing or where it was at, but it was a big thing. And I think a lot of that talk was R. Kelly abused children. So it must have been hard to say, I chose to go to this place as an adult, you know? That's what I found to be, because I think sometimes when we think about victims, we're like, oh, they're children, their brain's not developed, they don't know better. But how can an adult make a decision? And there was obviously, I think that's why she had to talk so much about the other men. It's like, you have to understand this was such a big wound about myself I couldn't learn.
Right. I was, the whole R. Kelly thing kind of shocked me. And so I had to look him up, and I wasn't familiar with him. Although I guess some of his music I'm familiar with.
The graduation song.
Yeah. I just, so when I read about his trial and all the hundreds of girls that he abused, it was like so shocking. And so, yes, I think for her to write about that must have been difficult. And I wonder if it's one of those things she, talked about with her editor or whoever
Yeah.
helped her.
And another thing we talked about is the ghostwriter, because I'm always so interested with celebrities who actually writes the book. And I found she does have a ghostwriter, and
Uh,
she has it in the back of the book. She has a thank you. And then I took the woman's name and I Googled it, and she said author of, Pursuit of Portia. And I think
ah,
it's interesting. In the last one, it has his name on the cover, and then all the press. Craig was like, yeah, me and my ghostwriter. Portia did not mention it at all, which I think
no,
is maybe it's also to defend her intelligence. Like, I can't talk openly about the ghostwriter because people say I didn't write it. But like any good celebrity who's writing memoirs should use a ghostwriter, I think.
right, because yeah, she's not known for being a writer. So
Writing's
I
hard.
but I did notice that there she did use a lot of vernacular and so forth. So whoever wrote it was tried to keep true to Porsha and how she talks and so
Hmm.
forth. So I did like that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, I think that's all, Grammie. Thank you for coming on my
Oh,
podcast.
it was so much fun.
I want to
I
do it every month.
great. You're gonna have fun with this, I'm sure.
Maybe it's my whole big way of like tricking you into watching Bravo.
Well, I know I want to now, so send me those links.
Okay, well, I love you. Thank you for coming on, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Okay, bye
Bye,
bye.
Grammie.